G'day, citizens. Welcome to Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by Algared. How you doing, buddy?
I'm alive. That's always a good thing.
Yep.
Standard response these days.
Yes, very much so. All right, so this is going to be our buyer's guide on the Firebird. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and thank you for everyone that went the extra mile at the end of the video on Patreon. All right, Algared.
Indeed.
How do you find this? Can we cut to the chase on this one? Because I don't think this needs a particularly long video.
Okay.
You tell me.
It's a fighter. It's a fighter. I rest my case.
Yeah.
Look, everyone knows our channel knows we say sell your fighters. At the end of the day, this is a fighter.
Yep.
So at best, it's an LTI token. Does it look great? Yeah, it looks great. It is. It is certainly a merging of the Raven and the standard body of a saber. It's got the same guns type mounts as a saber, as a Raven, but sorry, I shouldn't just say saber. But instead of the EMPs, it's got the bespoke missile rack. That missile rack looks like it would make it ideal for a ground attack ship, firing, like the Mustangs firing rockets at the German tanks in World War II. I can see this doing the same job. Does that mean it can't use its rockets against ships, or can it use them elsewhere? Yeah, and we saw in the Inside Star Citizen they were using it for both activities. But I think primarily it wins as a ground attack fighter, and that makes it unique.
I think for me it comes down to its function, really, between the Saber and the Saber Raven, and I prefer the function of both the other variants compared to this. It's got enough punch to take out 2 ships, which is an advantage, but then as soon as it's got no missiles left, it becomes a liability, where the others I don't think kind of suffer from that problem. They're kind of like the Saber's kind of stable across the board, and the EMPs can be reused, and you've got 2 of them, so you can set up 1 EMP and have 1 in reserve while you recharge the first one. So it's just not as big a liability as the other one.
Yeah, and the thing I like about the Saber Raven is the fact that it is not meant to be a stand-up fighter. It's sorry, the sounds are getting distracting me.
Sorry. Just the noise. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I'll get out of the
just the engine sounds. Just as they power up the engines, and it's like it sounds lovely. It looks like a lovely ship.
Well, before we get out of here, let's just take some highlights of the look of it then. Obviously, I've got the concierge skin on, so it's got the black and gold, and as I was kind of showing...
that does look really nice. And you were saying when you get really close, you notice it's all carbon fiber.
Yeah, it's got this really cool carbon fiber, and it shows up nicely in the lights. So I was down at Lawville earlier, and they've got these kind of gold lights and underneath the ship, and it just really nice and reflective. So yeah.
So that carbon fiber, you think that's actually part of CIG's stealth type nod?
No, I think it's just for this concierge skin, personally.
Because I do recall them talking in the ISC that this ship is a stealth ship.
Yep.
Which does put it above, I think, the standard Saber. That puts it maybe on par with the Raven, but I think the Raven's still the better ship, just because it's a ship meant to run, and so when it gets caught, it neutralizes the enemy and P-bolts. And I think that's a unique thing on the ship. It's one of those things that does make it stand out. If this is a ground attack fighter, if you're using it to take out ballistas, as we saw them, the very first thing we saw it take out on ISC was a ballista.
Yeah.
If you're using it as ground attack, that stealth ability to sneak up close and then fire your missiles, I think, makes it ideal. But that limited ammo is the thing that keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's the linchpin, isn't it? For me. And again, we're looking at this, again, like you said from the start, we don't recommend fighters, but we try to look at everything on its merit. And again, for me, I think it also shows a bit of the weakness because the QED is coming out after this. And my instant thought was like, well, now I know a QED one's coming, and the reason we know that that's coming is John Cruz said earlier during the week, everyone thought the Firebird was a QED, and he said, well, that one's coming next.
Yeah. The question is whether it's a Saber Saber Firebird, a Saber QED version.
Yeah, it is another variant of the Saber coming that's
so
QED.
if it's another variant of a Saber and it's QED, then I can't. I have to see what they do to the QED to balance it and make this not crap.
Mm.
Does it just replace the?
You've even got to look at the Mantis. Like, is it going to do everything the Mantis does? Because if it does, that's going to be amazing, and it almost kills the Mantis straight away.
Well, the other thing that comes to mind, if they make another Saber based on this chassis, so the kind of Raven-esque chassis, and they're making it a QED version, so they're ripping out the spoke missile bay and putting in QEDs.
Yeah.
Doesn't that indicate modularity on the Saber? Like, you could rip out the MPs and put a QED in, rip out that, put in the missile bay.
I guess it really depends how you look at it, because realistically, like, changing weapons is technically a modular component. Changing the components is a modular component. It's just an upscaling of that to a room level event on a retaliator, right? So,
well, the fact that it's the missile bay on the standard Saber that gets ripped out and gets replaced by the QED or the EMPs on a Raven, the fact that that's basically almost ripped out and replaced by this 12 missile pod, and they're bespoke to the ships. If you do the same thing and put a QED in, why isn't that bomb bay a modular component so that all the ships could take on those parts?
Man, that is very satisfying firing. Damn. But quite a few shots too. And quite a few shots.
Yep. Much quieter in the ship than outside.
Yep, most definitely. But yeah, I think
I thought in space no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
But
quite honestly, it's got some nice things, like they've got, the little fan grills there where the holes used to be and stuff like that. So it is a cross-pollination between the two. But at the end of the day, for me, Algared, it's another fighter. And when the other two fighters in my book are better than it, that it's around, it's just really hard for me to get behind. I'm sure there's some people that this will fall into their niche and this will be their thing. But yeah, it doesn't sway me.
The other thing that got me is when they were talking about the ship in ISC last Friday, they were talking about it in being a ship where if you don't like to get up close and personal in a dogfight, this is a ship for you.
Yeah.
So they spent all the time building master modes so that we have to get up close and personal. And basically this ship has said all our missile boats are the ships we use if we don't want to get up close and personal.
Well, I heard it a little differently. I was like, this is the combat ship if you don't like combat. That's what I heard. And I'm like, what?
So you fire your missiles at distance and P-bolt. So all missile boats are falling into that boat. Does that mean the miss is the misery is the same? It's in the same boat.
Well, that's what me and Paul talked about. Knowing that this is 100 and I think it's 185, and the misery is 175. I'd be reckoning the misery. The misery's got more missiles.
Oh hell yeah!
You can solo it pretty much just like you can this. It's bigger. It's got other things it can do outside combat. It's obviously not quite as maneuverable as this, but again, if you're sitting back, what does it matter?
Yeah, and it's got cargo hold. It's got the bed. It's got living quarters. It's got crew space for extra people. It's got internal components.
Yeah,
and it's a cheaper ship with big. What are the size missiles on it? It's got size 3s and I think size 4s. And I'm not sure it's got size 5s. I don't think it does, but bigger missiles, more missiles. Bad heck. Yeah. go the misery any day and twice on Sunday. And it's got the internal rack. So if you've got stalls, you could actually theoretically reload the internal rack. So yeah. It's a tantalizing thought. And then you've got even the Connies. The Connie Taurus with its missiles and an internal rack which you could reload.
Yeah. Well, it's just that.
And admittedly,
it's just that quick and out of missiles. So yeah.
Yeah. And the Connie's 52 missiles all up.
Yeah.
Admittedly, only size.
Well,
one
it can
and size two.
It can also reload, but obviously you need more crew to do that. With the, not the Connie, the misery. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, same with Connie. Connie does have an internal launcher on the Andromeda and the Taurus.
Yep.
And so you could actually theoretically...
But the Connie's not in the same price range. It's quite more expensive. And it's a completely different size of ship as well. So the only two ships I would really compare this to is the Misery and the Strike, to be honest with you. And of course the Sabres.
I was thinking the Taurus in terms of price, because it's only $190 or $200 now.
So an extra $15, yes.
So it's in that same,
I think what you're trying to really get at is not that it's the ship; it's really the fighters are overpriced. That's really what you want to look at in this regard. So,
pretty much. And when you look at the missile capabilities of all those ships, this is again that all of those ships. When you look at the missile components, just say this is overpriced. There's not enough missiles.
Yep. Well, this has had its gold pass too, so you've got to imagine what the Freelancer is going to be like when they go back and redo the Misery and the other Freelancers as well. So, that's where I'd be leaning personally, and me and Paul did say that as well.
But is it a nice ship? Absolutely.
Yep.
It's a beautiful looking ship.
Yep. So I think we'll kind of wrap it up there, Aegis. I don't think there's really too much more to add.
No, no, there's not.
It's a pretty standard affair. Like for me, it's probably worse than most fighters, because I look at other fighters and go, well, there's already better stuff out there. And again, just at that price point, there are better, especially when the Misery exists. Like, you just can't look past the Misery when it costs less and does what it does plus more.
Yeah, and the other thing to look at, like the one plus this would normally have is it's an LTI token.
Yep.
But at the moment, there's a plethora of smaller, cheaper ships that are LTI tokens. So even at that point, it gets killed.
Yeah,
as a viable choice. So
this really does feel like it's trying to appeal to the people that wanted a Raven that couldn't get a Raven. Yeah, that's the long and short of it. Yeah, and you're paying a premium for it, unfortunately, in my book. But what would you like to hear from the people in the comments below, Algared?
Well, were you someone who really wanted to see have a Raven, and does this ship appeal to you for that? I know there are some people who've said, I've got a Raven, I've got a Sabre, I don't want that. Because so some people do, some people don't. If you weren't someone who wanted a Raven but you like this ship, why? What is it that appeals to you?
Yep. I think for me it would be, would you recommend the Misery instead, or the Strike? Or is there any other alternatives like Algared recommended with the Taurus and stuff like that you would look at? And I think just even when Algared does recommend things that are probably not quite the same vein, you can still see what Algared's getting at. It's a value proposition. And for such a small amount of money, there's just better options out there. So for me, it's with the Misery, and it's like Algared said. So I'd just like to hear from you guys. Like, do you kind of agree with that the Misery is a better option, or is there another option out there that you think that might need to be considered?
Or even, are you looking forward to a QD version of this?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Would you like to see the Sabres Missile Bay be a modular component, which could be swapped out with the different?
That'd be awesome, actually. If this was modular and you could go between the variants, I would be down. I would be 100%
man,
down.
If they did that, that would make the Sabre, I think, one of the best fighters in game. Absolutely. Because you could take the Raven's Missile Bay or EMP, slot them in. You could take the Missile Bay and put it in a Raven.
Essentially
puts it on so many options. Yeah.
Essentially puts it on par with the Hornet in that regard. Yeah. All right, then. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And thank you to everyone that went that extra mile at the end of the video on Patreon. With that, then, he's been Algared.
And he's been Execute, and we're out of here. Take care.
See you, citizens.